Hi Insters, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new, welcome too. My name is Hinny, I'm a spiritual astrologer, and we are back with another video on my to-do list. This one is on the South Node. I'm going to talk very quickly about the South Node with you today in the birth chart. So for the South Node in all the houses, all the 12 houses. So I will put timestamps as well in the description box below to look at later if you want to skip straight to your particular house. I just got back from watching a film called Concrete Utopia or Concrete Utopia. It's a Korean film. If you like Korean films, I recommend it. And anyway, there was a scene in the film. It's not a big scene, so I'll just tell you, but there's a scene in the film that kind of reminded me a bit of the South Node. It's kind of funny that this is the day also that I'm filming this South Node video, which I'm launching on a Saturday, but I'm filming on a Friday night right now, because I'm very busy tomorrow. But yeah, the scene was like someone trapped under a building and a group of people trying to like lift. Was it a building or a car? I think it was a car, big vehicle. Lift a big vehicle up and rescue this person. And maybe they could have done it, but they realized that the disaster, because this film is based on a big disaster, the disaster was ensuing, encroaching, was getting close to them. And yeah, one by one, they kind of decided to, fend for themselves or save themselves and leave the person. And there's this element with the South Node, which we're going to get into, that is kind of like that. It's kind of like, it's a very deep and spiritual sense of letting go of things and knowing when it is the time to let go, but also it's mixed with this sense of, should I have let go? Could I have stayed on, clung longer? And if I did, would we have all perished together? And if so, would that be better than one person kind of saving themselves or letting go? And is that one person saving themselves really selfish? And also it reminded me of this novel called Enduring Love by, I think, Ian McEwan, which I read many years ago. It's one of my favorite novels. And in that novel as well, there's a film as well, but in that novel, there's a similar scene where there's like a child, I think it was, in a hot air balloon, and there's like this gush of wind, and obviously the wind gives the balloon momentum and it starts going up, but it starts going up before the adults are like in the balloon or before the father gets into the basket. And sorry, sometimes I'm really bad at explaining stories and scenes. But anyway, as the balloon goes up, these different men these adults try to grab one of the ropes and obviously save the child or stop the balloon from going up. But there's not enough men to hold it down. There's too much momentum, and the balloon just keeps going up and up. And yeah, one by one, the men are kind of letting go of the rope, kind of deciding. And it's a very tough thing, this decision to let go or to hold on, to keep doing something or to stop doing something. And this is the South Node. So without further ado, let's get into it. By the way, in your birth chart, if you're not sure, the symbol for the South Node, it looks like a U shape, kind of with two little balls on the top, or a horseshoe with the open end on top. It opposes the North Node exactly in the chart. So it's always opposing the North Node. So obviously you will have the North Node in the sign that is opposite to where you have the South Node. And these are nodes of the moon too. So we need also to understand our moon placement in the birth chart and its relationship to the South Node. This can be one of the big keys to understanding more intimately our South Node, also the North Node, but we're doing the South Node today. I'm very intimate, by the way, with this one because I have my natal south node conjunct my Jupiter in Leo in the second house. Yeah, let's think of the south node as the tail of a snake or a dragon. I did do a little video, by the way. I don't know how long ago, but I did a little video on the nodes in general. Check that out. I will put that somewhere in this video for you. But yeah, there's a snake or a dragon you can imagine, and the south node is the tail and the north node is the head. Now imagine that snake has been cut in two, with the tail end parting and drifting away, and the head still sort of snapping away at something or chasing something. In modern astrology, very often these nodes are described kind of like this. That the north node is good because it's what we should be chasing or aspiring to be, and the south node is bad because it's what we already know or have, or it's what we've already been. And in traditional astrologies, then it's a bit different, not exactly the opposite to these modern interpretations, but the north node is more on the bad side because it represents things like greed, the power hungry, the futile things, futile pursuits, and so on, while the south node represents more this sense of being at peace with loss or escaping and not being easily captured by desire. However, we need also to look at whether or not we have natal placements also conjunct these nodes, because the benefic, quote unquote, planets like Jupiter and Venus, they were considered to be bad when touching the south nodes. That's very interesting. But this is because it was thought that, for example, if you have Jupiter or Venus there with your south node, that Jupiterian or Venusian things would be lost or decreased when co-present with the south node. If we return to this image of the severed snake, the south node is where we are more spiritually content. It is also where and how we are more escapist, sometimes to our material detriment. It shows where and how we can be more sacrificial, more charitable, and where we experience more loss or de-acceleration. You may notice the kind of in traditional astrologies, there's not really this association of the south node with past lives, while with modern astrologies, there tends to be this association. So there's this perception that the north node, for example, is who or what you are going to become, and the south node is who or what you have been already, like past lives. We need anyway to know which house our south node is in, and we can then get a better idea of the kinds of experience and theme the south node brings for us and our lives. We look then also to our moon placement, as I mentioned earlier, as this is like the key to balancing and to better understanding or harnessing the potentials of being too close or too far away from our south node. And the south node is like, it's kind of like making a cup of coffee. You're making a cup of coffee or some sort of drink, maybe a nice cheeky little matcha latte, and you accidentally spill some of the powder or the ground beans, the ground coffee, and it's being okay with that. It's like being okay with that. It's like a lot about contentment with the south node. And in Gallic culture, for example, and I'm sure in many other cultures around the world, it's considered good to give or lose like a first piece or sip or like slice of something that you cook or prepare. Even some people, like if they open a can of pop, they will give the first sip to someone or to give it to nature. It's also a bit like overpaying when you go on a date or buying your colleagues like a bit too much. South node heavy people can be also dreamy or absorbed in computer games. This is like that person who also has like shelves and shelves of fantasy novels, and they play games like Dungeons and Dragons all the time. The south node can also kind of make us lackadaisical. It can also create these people who don't really want to try new things, or it seems like they don't have desires. They could be deeply boring as well, or appear that way. But this is also like that Nelly Furtado song, All Good Things Come to an End. It's the marker of a spiritually mature person, even though they might be very young as well. So anyway, the South Node in the first house, real quick, or South Node rising. In my practice, I consider anything in the house, the first house, to be rising. So you're also South Node rising if you have it here. This gives anyway a very South Node-like personality. Maybe you're deeply spiritual. You might also be a bit of a recluse. This is like, here in Korea, there's this expression, 그럴 수 있어요. Like, this placement gives kind of like, it is what it is, or that's life, kind of person, kind of attitude, because this is the first house. The first house does also involve the body and physical health, and there could be some losses here, or there is like a sense of not really caring for the body, like those I want to die young kind of rock and rollers. And South Node rising people can also struggle with motivation. This is like the person who doesn't want to move out of their hometown or their family home. They don't want to change their regular supermarket. They're like pretty content with what is like immediately and easily available, what is within arm's reach, because the first house is also associated with newness and beginnings. South Node rising people might also struggle with things like starting again. And they might even keep themselves in a situation or a relationship or a place, a space, even though it's damaging them. And if the moon is in the 7th house especially, these more kind of slightly negative potentials, I think, can be better balanced out. South Node then in the 2nd house, I've got this placement, as I think I mentioned before, so I can vouch for many of the things going on with this one. But the 2nd house is associated with your money, your stuff, your assets. And so easily this can create overspending or carefree spending. It can even create mindless spending. Like I mentioned in the intro, this can create people who give or spend too much on other people. There is this higher willingness to give things away as well. And money can be just spent like water. It may, if you're born in the year of the horse as well, this kind of is even worse. But it may come to you in huge amounts, money, but it gets spent or given away quite quickly. Again, like water, and you almost kind of get surprised that you spent or lost so much money or energy or whatever, or time. And saving also could be a big challenge here with South Node in the 2nd house. On the other hand, quite oddly, it can also create like this reluctance to spend or invest in things. And again, this doesn't have to just be money. It can also be like time and energy, like this reluctance to open up and invest your time, your energy into people, into things. And the 2nd house is also food and diet and nutrition and gardening. And these things can be like what you might escape into, but it can also make you latent and careless about these things. And maybe, like me, it takes you a while to realize what you're putting into your body, and you slowly start to motivate yourself toward better habits and balance things out. Having the moon in the 1st house or with the South Node in the 2nd house, I think can be a big help here. Or even if you have the moon in the 8th house, can be a really big help. Okay, South Node in the 3rd house. The way you relate to your surroundings may be somehow South Node-like. I have this image of you kind of getting lost in a book or on your computer or your like music, your headphones on, in the middle of this like big bustling Starbucks or some, I don't know, spacious museum or gallery. This is similar to South Node rising people. You might have a carefree or very forgiving way of communicating or relating with others. The 3rd house also rules siblings, and this placement can bring siblings lost as a theme for some people. It can bring siblings unmotivated or escapist siblings, or those siblings who are more giving of themselves as well in that South Node sense. Third house also includes basic education, and you might be really into something quite fundamental or simple, and maybe you have a good sense of basic life skills. The third house, by the way, is also the joy of the moon. So I do read in this that you have a special connection to your surroundings. Perhaps you really can sort of meld with others or easily dip into your environment with good intuition and with ease. Especially if you have like a sign like Pisces here. This can also finally create exceptionally dreamy or imaginative people. South Node in the fourth house then. The fourth house involves your house, your home, your roots. And so having the South Node here can create losses of these things for some people. It can, of course, bring out this strong tendency to live or to stay in the same place. This is also the house of the past, and people with the South Node here can be lost or stuck in the past. This is like the old man who's very much stuck in his ways, or like a stubborn bull who is very much content with doing things how they've always been done. But at the same time, it can create people who have a kind of it's a water under the bridge sort of spirit about them. It can also create history geeks, maybe even an Egyptologist is among my viewers, or more generally, someone like deeply retrospective. This is one of the family houses also, of course, and feminine family members being lost could be a theme here, or the mother is somehow South Node-like. And also mysteries and buried things are here. And some people with this placement may be deeply into occult things, and there may be a subconscious latency here that prevents the native from taking necessary big actions. But if you have the moon in the 10th house, especially, this could really help balance that potential out. South Node in the 5th house then, because the 5th house contains the themes of children. There could be, for one or two people, this theme of loss of children, or the children are somehow South Node-like, or maybe there is a reluctancy to have children as well. And all of this can also apply to pets and plants, or anything that might be considered as like a cared for or produced child. This is, of course, the house of pleasure also, or it's the house of fun. And natives with the South Node here can be deeply into pleasure, especially pleasure of the self. And it can easily create people who are very into casual dating, or people who fall head over heels in love. This gives deeply romantic people and people who are very sexually engaged. And the native can also be very lost in their creative work. I'm seeing musicians here who are like always in the studio, or like someone who's always writing lyrics or writing drafts of their poetry or a novel or whatever. And this placement also brings out like a carefree attitude toward risk taking. There can also be a great kind of carpe diem sense here. This kind of you only live once kind of vibe. And I get also here Peter Pan vibes from this placement, and people who sort of still go to clubs and like raunchy parties way into and past their 40s, so living it big and large. All right then, South Node in the 6th house. This is, here bad luck kind of falls away and things end up being nothing much at all. The native with this placement can have a deep understanding of things like sickness or suffering. Maybe they have a strong sense of healing through pain or illness. It could also create someone who seems to enjoy a pity party, though in reality, it's more like they just get stuck in hardship. Or this also gives people who get mired in their own suffering. This is like someone who's also fine and really strong with living with an injury, while other people might be more distraught or find it more debilitating. The native might not really want to take care of their health or fix their bad situations. The person may struggle with developing their career or with working on their CV. there can be a strong attitude of work just being work, and that the type of job doesn't really matter. The sixth house makes a trine to the 10th house, and in this I read that some with this placement will have a reputation for being quite relaxed or spiritual or forgiving. Having the moon in the 10th house will really aid any sixth house difficulties this placement can bring.